Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here with us.
In the end, we did what we felt made the most sense for our team. And David felt comfortable with it. The staff felt comfortable with it. I think the players felt comfortable with it. I think we're respectful of what's happening. We're respectful of the process of it and everybody that's involved. So, again, the most important thing is for all of us, our coaches and players, myself included, is to focus on the things that we can control. And as we get more information, as we get closer to training camp, then we'll try to make the best decision for the Houston Texans, whatever that entails.
I've learned that basically I'm the head coach, but I have to catch myself now. And that's why, again, I got to remember you're the head coach. And here's the other thing. You hired those guys to coach and teach their way, not my way. We all have a way here, and it's the Texan way.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And we're in that dead spot in the off-season where we're trying to probably come together as a fan base, because it's a long old road ahead to the season, and then we've got to run the gauntlet of the 17 games ahead of us as well. So we have started this week and delighted by the response in terms of the fan roundtable, and we've got our first three guests, who I'll let them introduce themselves to you. But starting with Rene, thanks for joining us, mate. Do you want to give us your turn up for what moment? The moment that I've said coming back from Denver and thought, why did I do this to myself? Have you had one of those moments? And then maybe just give us a little bit about how you became a fan of this rather dysfunctional team.
Hey man, thanks for having me. Man, there are so many of this what the fuck moment in the last two seasons. One moment was when we go for the fake punt against the Chiefs. A few moments before, we decided not to kick a field goal on 4th and short, and then we go for a fake punt at our own 25. We missed it. I know at this moment we will lose this game, and O'Brien should have been fired in the halftime. So instead, he got the chance to win the team. No, it was a little bit like the beginning of the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't think there's been as many moments in one game. There's sometimes I remember talking about at the time, and there's moments that decide a game, and then there's moments that happen maybe 3 or 4 a game, and there was about 4 in the space of a second quarter. So yeah, I understand it. Well, Rene, thank you very much, mate. And Pete is London, but he's got a bit of a different accent. Rene's coming from Germany and a bit of an international feel to these. But Pete, how you doing? And do you want to give us a bit of background and what's your sort of turn up for what moment if you got one?
Yeah, my name's Pete. I think mine was last year when Deshaun was sitting on the sideline after the end of the Colts game. And he had his hand in his head, and he was I just thought, we're going to waste another talent, aren't we? I had that feeling that we had with JJ and Dre and everyone else, and I just looked at it. That was my big, something's got to give here moment.
Yeah, I think so. I remember that one. It was, I think last season was tough, and it was tough to do this. It was tough to write articles, and it's challenging at times mentally, I think, as well. And it's just, and you'll always, I don't think they'll ever, it'd have to be go seriously wrong, I think, to not watch the games and do stuff like this, because you kind of get in the habit of it, and it's hard to break it. But yeah, I think that's the big thing, doing these roundtables, and then also doing going through this season as well. You just don't want it to be repetitive, because last year, pretty much from week 5 onwards, was just like, who's the new coach, who's the new GM, and none of it even came remotely close to anything we talked about. So you want to keep it relevant and keep it fresh, but at the same time, it's going to be a long old journey, and that was a big reason why I wanted to do these things, because I think you've got to expand your fandom just beyond the screen sometimes, whether that's a phone or a TV watching the game. I think because it's probably safety in numbers a bit this year, but I tell you what, Graham's probably going to give us a bit more of a brighter outlook. Probably the biggest Texans fan I know, but a measured one. Coming from rather a bit more north for me, but not so far. Graham, how you doing? It's probably your third appearance now, I think, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Hi, thanks again for having me on. I think it is about the third time, but Yeah, my turn up for what moments? It's hard to like pull them all, one out of the bag, isn't it? When you look back, but when I think about how we've tackled like playoff games against the Chiefs in the past few years, like even going back to like Hoyer's time, you know, I went into that game pretty confident that we could maybe turn the Chiefs over at NRG, and look what happened in that game. You know, we couldn't even do anything on the goal line, and I think that's where we're falling short, and that's what irritates me most is these goal line, you know, go for points, and you know the Deshaun Watson head in his hand thing that come off the back of one of them as well, I believe. So those kind of moments really test your mettle when you're a fan. You know, when you see other teams punching it in those drives, and you just want us to take that step in the playoffs, don't you? I think every one of us can agree we just need to make that step. We seem to be making steps backward, but just want to make that step.
I think when you think of the playoff defeats, and I think we've been on the cusp for so many years now, and I think when you think 2017, the defense was all time probably the best defense we've ever had, arguably maybe second beat defense probably had the side of 2011, 2012, and everything was there apart from the offense. Then the year following, you find a quarterback and the defense gets injured. And you make a bad choice at cornerback, and there's just been so many sort of small sliding door moments that have led us to this point. But here we are, and I think it kind of is what it is now. We've kind of got to make the best of it. But talking of the best times you've ever had, or a moment that got you into this this sort of habit, I suppose is the best way for it. But was there ever a moment, Graham, we'll go the other way around, but was there a moment that you had? For me, it was just Dallas 2014, O'Brien's first year. Being in the stadium, and Arian Foster's running the ball unbelievably well. And the crowd was probably 60-40 Houston. And I just thought, I'm going to have to keep doing this. It was a great feeling. It was a great moment, I think. And then, don't get me wrong, it's seldom got back to those levels of excitement and entertainment on a Sunday. But there's moments like that keeps you coming back. So what's your one, Graham?
Yeah, like there's always moments that keep you hooked. Against the Bills there in the playoffs, and when we were in the stands, and I was sitting behind Deshaun Watson, in the end zone end, when I seen the two Bills defenders coming in for the sack. We could see it before the offensive line. We could see them coming, and I just heard this huge sigh coming out of the stadium, like, oh my God, we've blown it. And then when he bounced off both guys and made the pass, honestly, the energy levels in there were unbelievable. Like that kind of moments, and that's like a recent memory. We've had them over the years, but through the cluster that is now, to see moments like that, that's what keeps you wanting to go back. It keeps you totally hooked on this team. Whether or not we'll have that going forward, that's another story. But
I was going to say you might find it's the sport rather than the team as this team. Actually, I've got a question that I'm going to drop in later on about that. But Pete, when did you first start getting in this team, and what was the kind of moments that kept you coming back for more punishment?
So I started watching the NFL in like 99 or 2000. And I started watching like Vikings and Chargers games. I decided to be a Texans fan. It was a conscious decision for me that they were a new franchise. I was new to the sport, and I was like, new team, need new fans. That's my team. So I made that. That was like a conscious commitment. There wasn't anything that kind of triggered that. I think the best moment was Wembley a couple of years back. I bought my tickets. I was like maybe 8 rows back, right behind the Texans. I bought them from season Jags holders. And just being able to dance drunk down the aisle while we were giving the Jags a nice little tap in at Wembley, that was a good feeling.
Yeah, and Rene, what's your one, mate? You were in London as well, I remember from the messages. I think, I remember that. That was a good weekend, that, in so many ways. Got the train down. It was reasonably difficult to meet people because London just is one of those places. But Was that yours, or what's your story on that one?
Yeah, of course. I've been a Texans fan since 2013,
right?
And there's many moments where you get a feeling for this team. London, of course, Wembley is this moment for me because it was the first time I could see this team live. I didn't have a chance to go Bond to Pond and see it in the USA. Maybe I will do it in the future years. I hope so. Another moment I remember was the first touchdown pass of Watson against the Patriots game in his rookie season. Because this was a moment when I think, okay, we got someone special here. We don't have some of these guys we had the years before at quarterback. This is a special one.
Yeah.
Makes me sad at the moment to know he maybe won't play any more game for us. But this was a really, really great moment for me.
Yeah, was that was the one to
Bruce Ellington.
Bruce Ellington, yeah, that was it. Yeah, that's right.
He put the safety to the left with his eyes and went for the dart in the middle. Was such a nice ball. We didn't see such a touchdown pass years since Matt Schaub. We couldn't see something like that.
Yeah, I remember when I think they might have to settle for a field goal at halftime, or they were driving late. And I always remember he missed Steven Anderson in the end zone, and he should have caught him, and they probably would have won that game. I think Steven Anderson's on the Chargers still, but now in the league, he was quite a good move, tight end in that year. But yeah, I remember he missed him in that game, and it was just like you could see everything was coming together so quickly. But there was so much more to go as well, and that was kind of what was oddly exciting about it. But yeah, it's a constant gut wrench, I think, isn't it, to think about, he might not play again.
Guys, could you remember the moment when Osweiler got benched against the Jack in Energy and the whole stadium got nuts? That was a crazy moment too, well.
And look at this, Osweiler is benched. Tom Savage is coming into the game. And the fans here in Houston go nuts. Wow. That is a statement right there.
Not really talked about him a huge amount this off-season. Pete, what do you make of the hire in general, and what's your expectations for caretaker Culley, as I call
him? I think that what we're noticing, and I'm going to go into Caserio a little bit here, but Caserio doesn't bet on anything. He bets on multiple things. And I think that that's what the Culley hire is. If it works out with Deshaun Watson and he can get people on board and he can have the right coordinators, then it could potentially work. But if not, he can cut bait and run. And I think you're seeing that as well in his roster construction. So he's got a roster of players that can start, not high level starters, but that's what I think the hire is. That's what I think the Culley hire is. It is hedging his bets. I'm glad he's got a shot. Seems like a nice guy. I don't think he's going to change the world. I don't think he's going to move the needle. I'd like him to do well, but wasn't my guy. I wanted Matt Eberflus.
And and I think that there's definitely a line of thought out there that, in 2 years' time, if Eberflus hasn't got a job, he was pretty high on the list for Caserio. And obviously, I think there wasn't a huge amount said, but he obviously removed himself from the job. Caserio got him back in to re-interview, and I think he then said, appreciate the interest, but we'll now's not the right time for either of us. So yeah, you might get that wish at some point.
That's why I think Lovey was hired to start to recruit that type of player that Eberflus would want to start to get ready to move to that kind of Tampa 2 cover 2 scheme.
Yeah, I think you've probably made a great point there, Pete. I think there's definitely a sense of temporary. That nothing in this coaching staff or roster is nailed down. In terms of the comments, I think Graham, he made some comments through the week, and he says, "I'm the head coach." He outlined and the pictures of the practice field at OTAs. Saw Caserio out there, and he basically said, "Look, I'm just here to oversee this. I'm letting my coaches coach." Very different to what we've had in the past, Graham.
Yeah, I think he's like the safe bet. I think he's just a safe guy. He's been in the league for years. He's got a lot of connections. He knows a lot of people. Ticks a few boxes. And to say like he's the head coach, yeah, that's fine. He's maybe not the micromanager we're used to around NRG. He maybe will let his coaches coach, and you know, I wasn't too hated on him. Like, I know a lot of people didn't like him, didn't want him, and all that, but you know, I'm waiting to see the product he actually puts on the field. You know, I know our roster's not like a starline roster, but you know, you don't know how these guys are going to react to the man. You know, you see it in all types of sports. It's not just this sport necessarily, but it's how he can like ring the bell and get everyone to toe the line. You know, it's amazing what a unit of guys can do when they're fighting for one person. You know, if they believe in him, then I'm not saying we're gonna go on a big run, but we might surprise some of the pundits out there on our record. You know, because everyone's got us having a clean sheet on reverse. But yeah, I think, and we need to see what kind of product he actually puts out there week one. You know, preseason, yeah, I'm not overly keen on preseason. I don't think it shows you much. Just a slow way of getting starters into game time. But let's see what week one brings. You know, that's all you can do. I'm honestly don't have that much of an opinion on him until I see the product, and we don't get to see the product till week one.
Yeah, we'll talk about some
Kind
of the
of OTAs training.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the product in a bit, but I think he's got a lot of new players, certainly, but without going into specifics, Rene. But how do you see him and the coaching staff that I don't think he's necessarily assembled, but he's been tasked to lead? How do you see the task? And I think pre-season probably this year will become more important than it has been in the past, just because of the sheer number of players. And by the time that 53-man roster gets selected, we're probably looking at somewhere around 60% turnover of the roster from last year, if not more. Do you think it's possible, Rene, to get them in a position where they're coherent week one? Because you saw how slow we started last year with a reduced off season. Obviously, we get quite controversially cancelled the mandatory minicamp, or not so mandatory. But do you think a new coaching staff in this year, still some COVID restrictions, not quite fully there, do you think they can piece it together and at least be competitive?
To be honest, I don't have any expectation for this team this year. It will be part one of a minimum 2 year of rebuilding. I think Culley may be the best guy for this rebuilding phase, because he seems to be a good motivator. He seems to be the one who can hold everyone on track and hold everyone happy for this tough rebuild time. So I think we all remember the good old Bill O'Brien days when he came in Saturday to make changes on the game plan. Kelly was working the whole week. Or Quinnell don't let Weaver play his defense. So it's a good news to see a guy who's the CEO and let his coaches work. But I don't have much expectation for this season, to be honest.
He doesn't necessarily do himself any favors, I think, at times, because I think he's almost too honest. He's almost too nice. He's not had a huge amount of training and experience in front of the media. So he almost says phrases that probably somebody media trained might polish those answers, and some answers that you might not necessarily give there. Pete, do you think his personality almost counts against him? Do you think, or
it just shows that he's got a lack of that head coaching experience, and I think calling him a head coach is probably doing a disservice to head coaches. I don't see him having as much impact on game planning. He's going to be more of a coach's manager, if anything else, in my opinion. But the comments that he's been brought in because he had that interview where he was kind of talking a little bit too freely. about the Deshaun situation and got pulled in quite quick, didn't he? And I think ever since then he has been a little bit like, we're not going to talk about that, but we're going to be motivated and we're going to be happy and excited, and that's what he's going on. He's got that just Jack Easterby energy about him at the minute.
When I hear the interview with Mark Vanderman and John Harris, I got the feeling it was completely scripted for Culley after his slip again at the Huddle and Flow podcast, where he said Deshaun is our quarterback right now. So maybe Caserio muzzled him a little bit because he is not so experienced with the media.
Yeah, I think you saw him not. I mean, I talked about that with Brandon Scott on here, that he didn't talk at the golf day. He did talk later on, but every time he does, he almost does himself, or he undermines himself a little bit, I think. And I think that's just partly just due to he's got a very nice personality and a very nice outlook, and he's a kind of salt of the earth type guy. He's not necessarily the hardened football coach that you'd expect for somebody who's been in the National Football League 27 years, but yeah, I think, I talked about this with somebody on Twitter today, and it kind of goes into the point here. And I think that because, you're saying, Rene, you're not got any expectations right now, and you said it's a 2-year rebuild, and I think it could be longer than that. Would you be against us not taking a quarterback after this season and waiting some time to get the team in a position where you're ready to win, then draft a quarterback, similar to kind of the position that the Chargers have maybe found themselves in, where the team was pretty much there, just had a down year, got some injuries, and you're ready-made for a young quarterback that can be successful, albeit they need some tweaks on the offensive line and whatnot. But would you guys, Graham, would you be adverse to holding and building a roster and waiting rather than bringing a quarterback when you're still transitioning into a new era?
Yeah, you can hold off on getting the quarterback in, but the only problem with that is you've got to be really spot on with the talent you bring in, don't you? I mean, like, as a quarterback talent, because if you've got your roster there, you can only keep that roster for so long. I think we've seen that over the years. We brushed on it earlier. The defense was really good. I thought our offense back in maybe 6 years ago was good enough, but we didn't really have the throwing power there. And so you get this roster together, and then you draft that quarterback. Is he going to be the guy? You're staking a lot on it. Are you better to draft another quarterback and build the roster around him? Is that not kind of like what the Colts did? When they had Andrew Luck, and then they started building up the O-line. And I suppose now they've got a really good offensive line. Maybe they don't have the wide receivers there now, but they certainly, for me, seem to go quarterback, then build around the quarterback.
I think it depends on who's available. If you've got a quarterback there, and say you'll pick 1, 3, whatever it is, but if you've got a quarterback there and you say that's a 10-year starter, that's someone that can playoff games, you don't pass up on that, because potentially in another 3 years' time, you might have a better team and be able to draft someone, because there might not be a quarterback there for you. You might be scampering around and getting yourself a Blaine Gabbert or something like that. No, that's not worth it. So if there's a guy there and that's your guy, you take your guy.
Yeah,
Figure it out later.
I probably didn't tee that one up too well, but I think a big part of it is that perhaps the wily veteran, 11-year league pro in Tyrod Taylor might just do enough to win you some games that pushes you out of the top 3 or 4 spots, and maybe even a little bit more. And then that kind of puts you in a position. So I think if he was to do that, Rene, do you think that's necessarily a bad thing for the longer term success of this?
That's a good question. I'm not so sure what the plan of Caserio is. If he wants to put this rebuild for 2 or more years and will be waiting for the right guy. Maybe it's the next year, like Pete says, or maybe they are thinking we take a look at Mills and want to check out if he can be a starter. Maybe he will get his chance this year. Maybe he starts next year. We go defense next draft, and then take a look at Mills, and then look 2023, which quarterback is available. I'm not really sure which way we will go.
Yeah, Pete, what if you were to? What do you think of Caserio, and what do you think he's plan? You talked about him betting on multiple things earlier. What do you see his plan being over the net, or what do you think? He's got a 5-year, 6-year contract, whatever it is, third highest paid GM in the league. What do you think he's thinking right now?
I'm thinking that he came into a situation where he probably wouldn't have signed on the dotted line if there was no Deshaun Watson there, and he's walked into a bit of a shit show. I think that we've historically had a team that's been very top heavy with talent. We haven't necessarily had much depth, and if a starter's got injured, we've had subpar starters. So he's trying to build up the average of the team by having a overall average team, and then try to build on it from there. So I think he's giving a lot of people shots. It is that competition, but what else do you want to do in that situation? Trade all of our draft picks up to get in the back end of the first and get someone that may or may not work out? Like, he's just taking shots in the dark at the moment with a really bad situation that no one should really want to walk into if Deshaun's not here.
Yeah, I think, Graham, do you think you agree with that perhaps Caserio wouldn't have signed if he didn't know the full limits or the full if he had the full knowledge of everything that he knows now that was going to happen? Obviously hindsight's 2020, but I spoke to somebody the other day, and I believe quite firmly that they did know about Deshaun's situation. To what extent, I don't think we'll ever know, but I'm pretty certain from somebody I spoke to that they actually did know a lot more than perhaps you would have realised when they were making changes and right even back to when he signed the contract. But obviously people think they can manage things in certain ways. It's definitely not turned out like that. And I heard yesterday, which I didn't fully appreciate actually, that the settlement effectively is agreed between the two lawyers. It's just the details of that settlement and what each party has to do to sign off the settlement in the Deshaun case is the bit that's sticking. Deshaun wants it all to be public, which I thought was quite interesting. But taking the sort of Deshaun situation in Caserio, how do you think he's set out to handle it, Grim?
Well, I would agree with Pete. I don't think he would have maybe signed the contract knowing the full extent of how bad this situation was going to get, with your franchise QB. Saying that, I want to agree with Pete as well that he will take the best guy available in the draft, I think. So it doesn't matter who it necessarily is and that, but he will take the best guy. I think that's how Nick's geared. The situation, do you think, I'll ask you, do you think that the team knew, or they certainly knew about so you think they knew about the situation off field, but do you think they really knew how unhappy he was, like, on field? And
well, I believe he refused at one point to sign the contract.
Okay.
And I've heard Aaron Wilson say that as well. And I've heard that from somebody else as well, that he was very. It was close. It came. Why it ran as long as it did right up to the season was because he wanted assurances, and I think some of the assurances that he was given when he signed. And look, don't quote this as gospel, and if anybody's listening and thinks otherwise, let me know. But he wanted some assurances about his input into it. And I don't think it was the GM. It was just the way things were communicated and how certain people had a role. And I've never heard definitively that Easterby was, that was the big issue. I've never heard that definitively. So people believe that, and that's a perception. I don't know how factual, in fact, that is. When you piece 2 and 2 together, you might have thought Easterby was chasing him around, checking up what he was doing. You heard about Easterby contacting a player's parents and about saying he's doing it because he cares, and it all makes sense. But I've never had those bits pieced together firmly. But it's pretty certain the team knew, well before Caserio was in here about this. I don't think they knew the extent. But Houston's a big city, but it's like all big cities, the people in the know or the powerful ones. So I can't imagine too many people didn't know about it, particularly head of security. These guys are all paid, they're all ex-police, they're all ex, forces, etc., and they've all got links. But yeah, I think there's probably a lot more knowledge And I think these things go on a lot more commonly than people probably would like to admit or like to think they do.
Yeah, well, did they not start like paying off as enablers or people you would maybe put down as an enabler? Like is it Amy Polach or what?
Well, yeah, there was the head of PR I think went, and I don't know I can only speak
Yeah,
positively.
she was quite close with him though. And
yeah, I think so. She was with JJ as well, and I think, but that was a falling out with Jamie Roots, as far as I'm aware,
okay.
about the PR timing of the book and everything like that, and all those kind of stuff. So,
but that person would have known a lot about his goings on, I think, because I've heard that she stayed quite close to him. When they were on away games and stuff. Like, I think I even had I managed to get in the same Uber as somebody that had picked him up earlier on in the day, and she was with him.
Right. Yeah, no, I think she did take a big interest in star players because it was probably part of her job. But yeah, I think there was that, and obviously there was Mike Parsons, who was equipment manager, went in the off season as well. So, and he was rumored also to be an enabler for him as well. What do you think, Pete?
I think that the Texans probably knew that something was going up. I don't think they knew the extreme of what it was. I think they knew Deshaun was unhappy, but they didn't know quite how unhappy. And I kind of think that COVID has kind of made this whole situation a lot worse because we've all been on Twitter and we've all been, I used to go on Twitter once a week. I'm on Twitter every couple of hours now. And I think the talking heads on Twitter have really blown this up a lot worse than not the Deshaun cases, but like how unhappy he was and the whole situation. I also think Amy was the one that leaked him doing wanting the trade request as well, wasn't she?
Well, yeah. I mean, you don't know. I mean, a lot of the things that we just talked about there, I didn't get that from Twitter. I do read Twitter and I read Reddit and I read Facebook and try and stay off Instagram because that's a whole incident itself. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of reports out there, I think, and yeah, the leaks mounted up when she left. I don't think that was that, and I think the Watson camp straight to ESPN. Just kept throwing darts right through the playoffs, right into the off season, and we're in this position now where the last sort of month or so has been pretty quiet.
Means there's some work going on behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, as I said, I think it's signed and sealed. It's just the details of it is the thing. I think the amount, or I think because don't get me wrong, I had some incredible sort of responses when this first came out, and I think I think people probably don't want to understand or get their head around what it is like to be a pro athlete and some of the behaviours that go on. Just perhaps the reality of young men with a lot of money in their pocket. At times, not everybody, of course. But you just have to look at the Earl Thomas situation with his brother or whatever it might be. That's they do leak through every so often, and I think the fact that he's not in the league is a big reason why that story. But in terms of the Deshaun situation, guys, Rene, where do you see it ending up? What's your thoughts on it?
It seems the situation is very stuck at the moment. If I have to give a guess where he's playing, I would say he plays for the Broncos this year, but I'm not even sure if he plays this year in general. We don't know if there will come a suspension from the league or if there are some legal consequences for him. We don't know anything at the moment. The only thing I'm really sure is that he won't play for the Texans.
Yeah, I think he'll never sign another contract, whether he's in the building at some point. I think the big issue here is that the league haven't interviewed him yet, and the move to the exempt list, the determination of the suspension from the league's legal team, all comes through that being concluded. Now, if this is to run right through to the wire, the litigation doesn't start until after the Super Bowl. So, if it's going to have to, if it's let the legal process play out, and that's what the Texans keep saying, but I think that's Caserio speak for, we have no control over this. Then, he's definitely not going to play for anyone this year. Pete, what do you think? What's your feeling on it? Where does it end? Because I think we all want an end to this.
There's just too many variables. originally I thought he would get suspended past the trade deadline. That's what I thought the original suspension would be. I'm umming and ahhing about that. I think that the league should have interviewed him by now if they were going to. I'm guessing that they've had some conversations with some of the ladies that was reported. I don't know what the context was that they got from that. If it was strong, then I would have expected him to be exempt or suspended. If it wasn't, I would expect to be in the position we are now. So you can read into that what you want. I think he doesn't get traded, and I think he plays for the Texans again. I don't know if he'll still be on the Texans roster next year.
I think that's what we'd all like to see, because I'm of the opinion, I've said it a long time, a lot can change in 4 years that he's got. I mean, a lot's changed in 4 months for Deshaun. Graham, would you? Well, one, I'm sure you'd like to see that, but what's your sort of sentiment and where it'll end up in this off season?
Yeah, I'd love to see him back. You know, there's no denying that he's just too good a talent not to have on your roster. But I genuinely can't see him playing for the Texans again. And if he does want to trade, and it's not going to ever work out, you know, because he could opt out, you know. I just want to move on from it. Whatever the outcome is, I don't like these clouds hanging over a team too long. You know, let's get it sorted. Let's sit down. Let's work it out. You know, are you going to turn up and play? No, you don't want to. Okay, let's just move on. We'll get what we can for him. If we can get anything, move on and look at the future, because it's just you can lose a couple seasons. You know what difference is another couple seasons when you're striving to win it all.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think he endangers the chances. Him being here obviously improves us, but him not being here versus the rest of the roster, I don't think makes a big difference. What do you think, Pete?
Well, David Mulligata said he wasn't going to hold out. So that means that we're going to have a trade. So it comes down to whether Caserio thinks he can get fair value on a trade for Deshaun before the start of the season. I would argue that you're probably not, with everything up in the air. But I think for me and my fandom, if Deshaun's traded, that's pretty much the end of me with the Texans, because that shows to me that Caserio doesn't have full control over the roster. Because there's no way Caserio would trade him unless there's something legal going on that he knows about after coming from the Patriots and knowing how important Tom was to that franchise. There's zero chance that he does it. So if he's traded, it's because Cal and Janice won it. And if Cal and Janice won it, Caserio doesn't have control of the roster, and I've got no faith in the franchise.
Yeah, and I think the big reason why we're in this position is the McNairs have been too trusting. So I struggle to think that they would step in and put their foot down on anything. The influence of the wife, Hannah, always troubles me. I don't think she's good for any of us in terms of this football team being successful. But I think you're right. I think Caserio will trade him, but you'll make sure he gets maximum value. And my thought is he's a 25-year-old franchise passer. People will sell the farm to get that. And based on the length of tape he's got, I don't think his value changes now and it does in a year's time. I think before the next draft is probably the best moment to trade him, because then you can get 3 years worth of picks. I think if you trade him at some point this off season, unless it's the Eagles who have got the most picks in the short term, they can offer us the most. They can offer more than the Broncos, and they can offer slightly more than Miami. So unless it's them, I think that's the only feasible option. But I've always retained whatever you get will not be enough.
You know, his tape and his talent brings up value nobody can pay. We have to see what this legal stuff will do with his value, and I don't think anyone can take a guess what amount of picks you will get. Maybe it would be the best for Deshaun to hold out this year to bring in his legal stuff to an end, and then try to get a new team next year. Maybe it's also the best for us, so we can get a bad season, our draft picks for next year, and then start up a franchise with start start of the franchise with some picks for the Deshaun trade next year.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've always said I think 3 firsts and 3 seconds is the maximum effectively you can give, but I think it's probably the only fair value, like Rene's saying there, that can actually give you a chance to replace. Because then that's 6 players. Okay, realistically, maybe 4 of those will work in the draft in terms of value contributors. But it's I think we just all want it done now, and I think it's gone on far too long, and it just drags on. But I think in terms of this year, in terms of this outlook, I'm of the opinion that it's going to be bad whatever happens here. So let's if we need to hold our nerve and take the pain for a year on the field as well as off, if that means a brighter future for seasons ahead, then I think that's a price worth paying.
Yeah, to be honest, does everyone of us think this team will be so much better with Deshaun after seeing how bad we were with him when he has a career year? I think the defense is so bad that we will get the top 5 pick even with Deshaun playing for us. So I don't know if it's if it does at the short term such different if we have him or not. Long term, I would love to have him because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But short term, the next 1, 2, 3 years, we will be bad even with Deshaun.
2nd and goal. Hand it off. It's Foster slicing in. Touchdown, Texans.
Talk about the defense, and we'll look to try and cover some of the front 7 and who we think will make the roster. But Graham, just in terms of a broader outlook, how do you? This defense couldn't stop a nosebleed was Anthony Weaver's phrase at a press conference, and he was right. Although he was the head of that unit, and as Rene said earlier, I think there was some interference over Cornell, who's still in the building, but we've switched to this 4-3. And as Pete put, I think he's laying the foundations for perhaps somebody like that Eberflus. But do you think this defense, assuming the coaching's getting better, because I don't think it can get much worse on either side of the ball, do you think this defense can be better to make up for the distinct drop off in offense that we're going to?
I think they can improve. I like some of the noises that I'm seeing coming out with how they're tackling like the positions on the defense. They're maybe simple. They're dumbing it down. I think they're making it so simple in some respects. I've heard linebackers saying that they're getting all 3 positions at the linebacker position. They're being moved around. I think it's so they're plug and play. That'll go back to our roster might be average, but it'll be average in every position, no matter who you put in. Because I felt sometimes last year, especially in the secondary, that the drop off in talent was massive. We didn't have enough depth. We just weren't good enough. We sometimes we actually played the least talented guys, whether or not that was like a personnel issue, a personal issue with the personnel, I don't know. But you can only hope it gets better. It really can't drop much worse, can it? Really.
Yeah, and I don't think we've necessarily addressed the secondary, Pete. I think so. I know we're going to focus here on the front 7, but I think it's interlinked in many ways. But if you got guys that can't rush the passer, you can't ask anybody to cover for 7 or 8 seconds. But regardless of how good potentially some of this unit could be, I just don't see, Pete, for the life of me, how the players that we've attained in this roster, whether it's Terence Mitchell or what have you, are going to make any substantial difference to make our pass coverage better than it was last season.
Are we going to be watching Philip Gain and Vernon Hargrave start?
Well, no, but no.
Defense is better. If your answer is no, that they're not going to be starting, then defense is going to be better. I think last year we had JJ Watt and then guys that probably wouldn't start on a lot of other rosters. We've got average to sub-average starters, depth across the board. The only position I'm particularly worried about is the 1 tech. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a good place to start then. I think Pete is I think you're right, and I think that's the biggest, probably, when I was writing out this roster, if we start looking at the defensive tackle spots first. So on this roster right now, guys, just for a refresher, we've got Malik Collins, who signed over in free agency early, was let go by the Raiders. You got Jaleel Johnson, who was previously at Minnesota. We've got Ross Blacklock, who's a big linchpin player potentially, but yet to see any good tape. We've got Brandon Dunn, who was trusted in his role, but when it was more on his plate last year, he didn't necessarily perform. We've got Big C, Alafoloai, undrafted free agent, who's come in and was actually pretty good at the end of last season. Roy Lopez, and we've also got Vincent Taylor, who some of his tape isn't great. I don't see, Pete, any of those guys playing one.
No, I keep banging the table for Damon Harrison. He's still a free agent as far as I know.
Yeah, no,
I feel a whole lot better about this defense if we had someone like Damon Harrison coming in playing first two downs.
Yeah, we had guys like Grease Pickett. He was a long time at the Packers. Came in 2014. We had Vince Wilfork, and obviously everybody saw, albeit not a true one tech, but guys that it was the nose guard, that we never really replaced. And I think everybody who doesn't watch film certainly noticed the difference last year in the broadcast, the difference that DJ Reader made not being in this team, and the team were happy to let go.
Yeah, but McKinney played a big part in that as well.
Yeah, you big thumper, downhill linebacker, I think made a big difference in the game. But McKinney looked short, and he looked off the pace at the start of last year as well for the sort of 3 and a bit games that he played before going out with his injury. Obviously, McKinney's not here anymore. Rene, in terms of the 2 defensive tackle spots, who do you think would you say is your day one starters, sort of first and second down?
In the best case, no one who's on the roster, because we don't have any really big guys to stop the run. The biggest hope for me was that the run defense would be a little bit better because of a functional scheme. But if you don't have anyone in the middle who can stay with ground, it could be a disaster at the start of the season like last year. If we have to choose someone from the roster, I would say Jaleel Johnson would start. Maybe we can bring Roy Lopez back with a few more pounds, so he can be the long-term starter. But day one, Jaleel Johnson would be the starter for me. And out on 3, of course, was Blacklock. He has the most potential in the middle, and he has to show why he was a second-round pick last year.
Yeah, and I think, if you think of on a 3-year window, apart from Titus Howard, Ross Blacklock's the most premium selection that we've had. Graham, do you think Ross Blacklock's got a future at 3 tech in this 4-man front?
I think he does. His flashes were limited, but I believe he does. He just needs some more. He just needs coached up. When I'm watching games, I watch games different to you guys. You really study the tape. But I just get a feel for players, and I think Ross does have what it takes. It's just, pardon the pun, unlocking that at the next level for him. For me personally. But I think Ross Blacklock, he looks like he's been working out. His training's been going well. So let's see how he comes back into this team. I think he can lock down the position, but as for who he'll be lining up with, I couldn't pick a name.
Yeah, I think for me, Pete, I mean, my thought is I assume they take 4 on the roster, and I know this is very early before the pads have got on. But I think if you look at it, for me, I think it's Blacklock will be there because they'll have to give him a chance based on his draft slot. You can't invest. There's so few players, young players on the rookie wage scale that could potentially have upside and contribute. So you think that gives Blacklock one of the 4 spots, I think. Jaleel Johnson, Malik Collins was probably one of the biggest guaranteed money comes in. If he can show his Dallas form that he played with, he can rush a bit, and he's stout against the run. Jaleel Johnson in there as well. And then I think it's between Brandon Dunn, can he get back to where he was? Big Z and Vincent Taylor to compete for that 4th spot, I think, assuming they keep 4. And I think Roy Lopez is probably a practice squad type of guy right now.
I think Malik Collins is going to be starting day 1 3-tech.
Yeah,
I don't think Blacklock will, because Blacklock's moved from that 3-tech role over to 5-tech in the 3-4 front, and he's going to have to change back. Malik Collins has played the 3-tech for a while now. I don't think he was particularly used well at the Raiders from the snippets that I've seen. So yeah, I think Collins will be a day 1 starter at 3-tech. I just don't know who will be at 1-tech.
Yeah, I think Brandon Dunn. Yeah, I think Dunn's potentially the might start in there, and Jaleel Johnson's maybe got the potential to play as a rotational piece to try and relieve Malik Collins, I would think. Who would be your 4, Pete, if you're picking right now based on your knowledge of him?
What am I starting for?
Or your 4 defensive tackles that you carry on the roster?
Blacklock, Collins, Johnson, and then probably Dunn.
Rene, would you agree with that?
No, I would leave Dunn out and take Lopez or maybe Alufohai. Dunn has the biggest cap number, or has a big cap number which can be saved. So if he doesn't have a really great camp, he will be out, I think.
Yeah, I think he's probably the easiest money we can save. I think based on I think the Texans have Caserio's done a good job of that, but he's in terms of spending money, but he's also re-upped people's contracts, and I suppose that's my big fear this year. You got so many players that have had all their guarantees up front and are just on small nominal game checks, considering the size of their salary for the year. They may well mail it in at some point through this off season. But Dunn, I think, if his play is not up to where it has been, in 2019, where he was actually pretty good, you may as well keep a follow high, or even somebody like Vincent Taylor on small money, and I think you save about $3 million on the cap. And I think Caserio spent a lot of money this off season, but there will be a time where he needs to start clawing it back and building up some salary cap space for 2 years' time, when you're maybe in a position to go and fill needs. Graham, in terms of Charles Omenihu, nobody mentioned him in there, the defensive tackle. He's an interesting player. He was our most productive player last year in terms of pressures. What sort of role do you think he'll play in this defense? Do you think it might well be in the middle on passing downs, but do you think predominantly he'll be an edge player on the front 4 under Lovie Smith?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I like Charles. Him and Jacob Martin. I think Jacob Martin will see a lot more this year as well. But definitely Charles Omenihu. I think he'll be the guy that gets us the sack numbers this year. He's been working very hard, I know. That's a guy I follow quite closely on all types of socials. And yeah, he's been putting in the graft. Like he wants to take the next step.
Yeah, I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting Chuck, as his teammates call him, last year, or 2019. 2020 was a write-off for everybody. But he's a great guy, I think. He definitely searches for his name on social media, a bit honey badger-esque, because every clip I've ever put out, he's noted it. I think, Pete, what do you think of Omenihu? Do you think he's got the position? I just remember a clip I put out on Twitter feed, and he rushed around the edge against one of the Jacksonville line tackles at the start of the season, and he flashes so much good tape, but he's also so inconsistent, particularly against the run.
I think that it depends how much he's developed, because we've all seen him be putting in work on the off season. I think it's between him and Jenkins as to who's going to start opposite Lawson.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think Jordan Jenkins has been noted by the coaching staff. Bobby King has picked him up. I think obviously Shaq Lawson you acquire him in a trade, he's got a reasonable cap hit, sort of around the $9-10 million mark a year. He's probably your number one edge rusher in this front. Rene, do you see Jenkins and Amenahu being the sort of top three rushers, or is there somebody else in there that you might think might develop into a player for the Texans this year?
No, I have Lawson, Jenkins, and Menu as our top three rushers. Behind them, there's a fight for the last two spots. I see Merciless in because of his contract.
Yeah.
It's bad to have this decision making because of money, not because of talent. And when I see Jonathan Greenard, so for me, I hope Texans Ford won't hear this. I don't see Jacob Martin on this roster this year.
Yeah, and you might be right. I think because he's not got the archetypal body frame, and I know he's been asked to put on weight, and I know Whitney Merciless is asked to lose weight, oddly, to go and play on the edge this year to try and find some of the athleticism back. But in terms of this roster, guys, I think we'd probably all agree that Merciless will make the roster just because you kind of have to. You've already given him the money pretty much this year to restructure his contract. This is assuming all things being well. This will be his last year unless he comes back on a small vet minimum. I suppose it's a question: do they take 6 at the position, or do they just take 5? And is there a roster composition where Greenard, Jordan Jenkins and Jacob Martin are all on this roster? What do you think, Pete?
I don't know how you don't keep Martin on this roster because he brings a skill set that you don't really have elsewhere. You don't have that really explosive, bendy type of pass rusher. You know, you've got Charles that wins with length. You've got guys that win with power and technique, but you don't have anyone that has that explosion. So I don't know how you don't have him as at least that kind of designated pass rush type specialist that just comes in on third downs. I think you'd have to keep him on here. It just really sucks that we're keeping Merck.
Yeah, I think so. And nobody's mentioned DeMarcus Walker or Derek Rivers. I don't see an outcome where they are. If just say for example, guys, we're only keeping 5 of the top 5 I've mentioned: Lawson, Amenahu, Merciless, Greenard, Jenkins, and Jacob Martin. If they only keep 5 of those 6, who do you think's the odd man out, Rene?
Jacob Martin.
Pete?
I want to say Merciless, but I don't think it will be. I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it'll be Greenard.
Graham?
I want to say Merciless as well, but yeah, I'm the same as Pete. I'm not sure. Is Greenard still not a bit of an experiment? Moving him up?
Well, nobody saw him, so we don't know. He's in the shadows, but yeah, I think, and look, I think you've got to remember as well. I think we're in for some shocks on this roster as well because Caserio's not tied to anyone, and he's certainly not. He's more than willing to make the moves he needs to try and change things up a little bit. And would the dead cap hit phase him entirely? Would you think it'd be worth it? Look, I think Merciless could get cut at some point this season, but I think the contract value may just force their hand a little bit to keep him on this roster.
Watson pressure off the edge. Watson survives it and then checks down to Jones. Jones inside the 40, inside the 30, inside the 20, to the 10-yard line. Taiwan Jones. Deshaun Watson from the.
In terms of the in terms of the schedule highlights, and guys, what do you have any games that you've got circled in your calendar from Germany? Rene, I know there was talk of games being in Germany at some point from Albert Breer, and I think that will be a reality as the games in London are reducing down to 2 now a year. But is there any games on this schedule that you've got circled when you saw it come out?
I would like to see the 49ers game because they picked at our pick at 3 and take a guy we could have taken if we don't selbe fahren vor Tansel. And maybe we won't be looking so sad to the future if we have a Trey Lance here and won't and have a long-term answer for the time after Deshaun Watson.
And Graham, I know you're probably going to go to pretty much every game this year if they'll let you in. Try and make up for last year. Was there any games you had circled on the schedule when it came out, or are we looking forward to the draft pretty quickly?
Yeah, looking at it, I'd love to see the San Francisco game. That I don't know. I just have my eyes on that. But I'm interested about the Panthers game on the Thursday. Our only like midweek game. That's one I've got circled to go to. So I'm just hoping that goes ahead. I just want to get over every game that I'm available to go over to. That's the ones I'm circling. Doesn't matter who we're playing. I've got Titans game, Colts. I love those divisional ones. So much needle in them. I think it'll be interesting seeing how we compare in the division this time after running so close in so many division games last year. Because I've been on some other podcasts and they were all talking about how the Texans were so bad, but I was like, well, really, you only beat us by one score pretty much in every game, so we couldn't have been that bad. So I want to see how big the drop off is, if anything, that we've got this season.
Yeah, and I think the divisional games will be tight. Whether the offensive drop off, Pete will get us back in there. But is there any games that you've got circled? You think, well, one that are big moments in the season, or even games that we can just simply win?
For me, week 1 with Jacksonville, because that might potentially be the only game I watch this year, depending on what happens. I think the other one I'll probably watch will be Chargers, December 26th, because if I'm not watching the Texans, I'll watch Chargers.
Yeah, no, I think there's a couple of games in there that do scare you. Seattle, LA Rams, and a couple others that could, depending on how things pan out, could be interesting. But I think the Thursday night one, I think is the best. If you're going to go to a game, that's going to be the one, because there's a huge difference these days in a prime time game versus a 12 country club kind of feel to it. Some of them have had in the last few years when people have kind of lost their way a bit. In terms of season predictions, Rene, what do you see the record filing up at?
Oh man, I would probably say 3-14, but please don't ask me which games we will win, because I don't know. It's a long season, so there will be some teams where will underperform. So you have every time you have a chance to win some games. Even the Jets won a few games last year, so I hope we will win a few. But what about 3-14 will be my suggestion.
Pete, what do you think? 3-14?
Depends what happens with Deshaun, doesn't it?
Assuming Deshaun's not there, I think that's where we're going.
If Deshaun's not there, I think 2-15.
Graham, you top that?
Yeah, I'm going 4 wins.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be decided, and I think the coaching element will improve this roster. I think when you beat, like Pete said, the Jacksonville game week 1, Thursday night football, Carolina possibly, and I think the one thing that nobody knows, and the biggest variable probably in the division, is how good Carson Wentz is at Indianapolis. I think, and how well can he get back to anything like he used to be when he was MVP level, but he's been a good number of years removed from that right now. And then I think Tennessee might just have too much for us. And then you've always got the Jags, who could be who could come into their own this year. But is that where you see it ending up, Graham?
Yeah, I can see the Jags. I can see us topping the Jags twice. But one of the games that really actually interests me is the Cardinals game. How that game's going to pan out, we'll get to see personally JJ coming back the other way, and on the level of how much better is he going to be in that position, playing with a fresh team. I'm actually interested just for that experiment to see how much it's going to be coming back at us. How motivated he's going to be. Are we going to get to see vintage JJ playing against us? So that actually might be one of the games to watch, even if it turns into a blood fest. But I think it'll be interesting.
What will be tougher, Rene? Do you think it'll be watching Jadeveon Clowney if healthy and productive week 2? Because if you think of the roster, he should probably still well be here. If he'd accepted that deal that Chris Olsen offered his agent Buzz Cooks at the Greenbrier a couple of off seasons ago. He's never earned anywhere near the reported 18-19 million that they offered him APY. Do you think it'll be worse watching Clowney, who could still be your best defensive player on the roster, regardless of what happened with JJ, or will it be what? And what did you make of the comments that Clowney made last week about he's been looking for his whole career, he's looking for 8 years to play with a player like Myles Garrett?
I have to say I missed this comment of Clowney, but
yeah, he basically said that they said, "What's it like to play?" or "What do you make of playing with an athlete like Myles Garrett?" And he said, "Well, I've been waiting for 8 years to play with one on defense anyway."
Yeah, the Browns will be an interesting franchise this year. It's a division up to grab because I don't think Pittsburgh will do anything again like this, the last year. So I could see the Browns win the division. Will be a really interesting matchup to see Clowney against Titus Howard or Tunsil in week 1. So
Cannon.
Yeah, or Cannon. I hope we will see Howard.
Yeah.
I think the Browns will be the best station for Clowney because he can play this role he played with us long time. He's this great run defender and a man who sheds blocks and take up the double teams to give a guy like Myles Garrett the freedom to rush the passer. So it could be a really productive duo. And I'm
you got Olivia Vernon too.
Glad to that he found a place where he can be successful. I wish him the best, but not in week 2, of course.
Yeah, Pete. Just before we get out of here, what's going to be worse, watching Clowney, watching Watt, or even is it maybe even watching Watson by the time we travel to Miami before the bye?
I don't think any of them are good. I think Clowney's comments came more off the back that I think Watt freelanced a lot of the time and put the defense, like opened up some holes to run on and kind of put the defense at a bad position. Whereas Garrett tends to just beat his man and play in the confines of the defense. So I think that was more referencing that he had to pick up a lot of stuff off the back end of like covering for Watt. So I think that's where the comments come from. You know what? If I don't want to watch Deshaun in another jersey.
Yeah.
So if it's Deshaun in another jersey, if that's the option or there's anything else, then it's always going to be Deshaun in another jersey.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's I think I've said for a long time we've not hit rock bottom yet, and I think when you probably see that or that trade gets signed, that might be the rock bottom. But at least it'll be a chance for us to move on. It probably won't be happening too quickly this season, but hopefully we've kind of got a bit of array of countries, array in opinions, and we look like we've sorted out at least the front four. Before we get out of here, guys, I'll give you final last words. Pete, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to say that if we do trade Deshaun, I just hope that he's out for the whole season and he gets just traded next year. There's nothing for us to gain from trading him this year. I don't think his value's where it should be. I think he needs to get suspended or come back and play. But I just don't think there's a trade to be had this year.
Yeah, I hope you're right, but I suppose it elongates the pain. Rene, final words?
I hope the season won't be too long for us. I hope we can see some glimpses of potential and soon talk about the next year's draft with first-round picks of the Houston Texans.
It will be a novelty. Graham, is there any positives you can, or one thing you want to see out of the season before the attention will inevitably turn at the draft? What's the one thing you want to take out of the season that we can look forward to in some way and perhaps maybe even build upon for future years?
I generally want to see that fighting spirit. I don't care if we're getting hammered in games, as long as we're not giving up completely. You know, everyone's playing for the position this year, I think, for the next coming seasons. So, yeah, just don't lie down. There's nothing worse than being at a game and seeing your team lie down. So I want to see this product. You know, I'm not going to shit on the Texans too much. It is what it is. That's what being a fan's about. Sometimes it's rough, sometimes it's good.
It's all cyclical. That's what I keep telling myself. Pete, is there anything, Pete, that can change your mind before, or you seem to be probably at more boiling point than perhaps the rest of us?
I think I've just seen this for so long that I'm just at that last little bit, and I think that everything that's happening with Deshaun has just put me to the end where it's just put my whole fandom in question. And I chose to be a Texans fan, so I can unchoose to be a Texans fan, if that makes sense. But the one thing I wanted to say, big congratulations to Jamie Roots, new CEO of the Houston Dynamo. So that's a bit of good news to end on, isn't it?
Oh, right. Okay, well, there you go. I think, I think he quite openly told reporters that he would still be here if it wasn't for Jack Easterby, but I think a lot of change is happening, and I think more change will happen. I've been really surprised actually that Caserio hasn't ripped up the whole front office and started again. But he seems to be more process driven than people driven, I think, and he's going to trust people to run his processes that he thinks. But yeah, there's a lot more change to come. But hopefully this is just 1 week and 1 hour that'll help you get through this off season, whatever the hell happens. I don't think any of us truly know. It's been an interesting few months, and hopefully we'll keep coming back with these. We've got another 4 of these lined up from people all over the globe, like tonight, UK and Germany specific, but we're going to go further afield in the next couple of weeks. I'm really looking forward to having those people on again. But thanks to all the guys who gave up an hour of their evening to come and talk about this team, who give you not much in return. But as you said, there's something that keeps you coming back in some way or another. So thanks again for listening. If you've not checked out, we've got some articles up there. I don't think much has changed this off-season. They're pretty much pertinent to all of the off-season pieces on podcasttexans.com. If you've not already checked them out, please subscribe, give us a review on whatever platform you get your podcast on. Please share anywhere you can on social media. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you again next week.